When one wants to learn about the esoteric knowledge of the past, he will undoubtedly run into Rosicrucianism, Freemasonry, and the secrets of the Rose Cross. When we look at Rosicrucianism, we notice that there is some connection between the rose and the cross and some sort of solar significance. If we look at what is known as the rosy cross, we can see pentagram symbols, even a hexagram symbol within this cross, and its association with the rose. Now, if we go back to the Merovingians in the Merovingian dynasty, they were the initial kings of the Franks and claimed descendancy from Troy, which in turn claimed descendancy from Arcadia, who were known as the people of the bear. They claim descendancy from the mythologies of Callisto and how she was turned into Ursa Major, and we can see how prevalent bear worship was in Europe, bear and wolf worship. We have Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. Ursa Minor may be the more important of the two because in its tail is contained the Polaris star, and it's also wrapped around Draco with so much mythology which surrounds the dragons and snakes that we find worldwide. These two may counteract one another and represent two separate cultures that have been clashing for thousands of years. If we look at the fact that it contains the star Polaris, which is the North Star, which moves very little relative to the surrounding stars, we can also notice that it is the central location of the zodiac constellations, that by meaning that those constellations revolve around this particular position, and it may be a symbolism of even King Arthur, and within that we continue to see the root word R, which is in Greek, or ark, which is in Greek in reference to the bear. Also, we can notice that even the word ark is in reference to potentially this of Noah's Ark, with the zodiac, which is the wheel of animals, being representation of that ark. We can even look back to the origins of the Trojans and their surrounding populations of the Luvians, and within that terminology of the people's root name, we see the root word Luvian, which is also the root word that is used to describe the worldwide global floods, antediluvian world. So once again, we're seeing some sort of connection with the flood, which may have some sort of connection with the zodiac and the Polaris star and possibly the Ursa Minor constellation. We also see references to bear worship in a book called The Golden Bough. This was considered to be one of the most important books of the 20th century, written by Scottish anthropologist Sir James George Fraser, and he refers to bear worship all throughout Japan, northern Siberia. We also know of it in Europe, and we also find that bear worship was prevalent in the Americas, which involved the constellation, their own independent bear constellation in the north. Now, even though these constellations differ slightly, we still see a continued theme of bear worship in the heavens, and this had to do with the sacrifice, which involved good hunting for the season. So the bear was in some ways their god that they would sacrifice to in order for good blessing. So when they would sacrifice the bear, they believed its spirit would rise to the heavens. Now when we look at Venus, and you have a model which is based off of a centric Earth, what you're going to see is a flowering detail if you were to scribe its movements, and it would appear to have the shape of a rose. This is where the imagery of the bee comes into play. The Merovingians, one of the Merovingians, Childeric, who was one of the original known Merovingians, was buried with, I believe, 300 bees, golden bees. This was later found by the French, and Napoleon ended up having these sewn onto his garments, indicating he was aware of some sort of significance of these bees. When we view images of Freemasonry, we can see here that they contain the pentagram, and we can also see here that they contain images of the beehive. So the question is, why did they have these bees? And the answer is they were in relation to the bee coming to the rose. And so the two are representative of one another. Now, if we were to view Venus from a heliocentric model, we see that it forms a pentagram. And the problem is that they believe that it was an Earth-centered model. So the fact that they were pulling the pentagram so early, images of the pentagram so early, would indicate that they had knowledge of a heliocentric solar system. And when we look at the orbit of Venus, we see that it has almost a perfect golden angle when looked at in the perspective of a 360-degree circle. Or, if we know about how the ancients calculated their ancient calendars based off of 360-day calendar system, they would have also gotten the perfect golden angle of 222.5. And when we look further into Venus, we see that it has a 224.7 orbit around the sun. I believe it's even closer when it's taken into consideration in relativity to the stars. So if we move on, we can see that Mars, which is the male aspect, Venus is the female aspect. Mars, when we look at the fact that it had a 666-day calendar relative to the 1080 that was so sacred to Earth, we see the phi golden ratio come once again. 1080 divided by 666 gives us that 1.62, just as 360 in relation to the golden angle gives us the near perfect orbit of Venus. So there's some sort of commonality between these three planets. And even if we look at the planet Mercury and how Mercury was always represented as the messenger, Mercury being the closest planet to the sun, thus being the messenger, is pretty much how it can be perceived. But also when we look at the symbol of Earth, we can see that it is a representation of a cross. And when we analyze that, we can see that there is some sort of correlation between that and the fact that it's crossing between the female and the male planets of Venus and Mars. There's also a similar mythology of a planet of the crossing, and that's known as Nibiru. When we look at it, it is known as especially the crossing of rivers. And so when you analyze that in terms of how the ancients understood the heavens to be, they viewed them in almost an aquatic nature. We also see that the Sumerians had a strong understanding that we were in a heliocentric solar system, as we can see on this cylinder seal of the sun clearly in the middle and planets around the outer edge. Now, whether or not these are a depiction of our solar system is in question due to the fact that these planets are don't match up in size or position or quantity to that of our own solar system. So the question is, what exactly are they depicting? It is clear that it is a solar system, but the question is, what were they exactly looking at versus what we perceive today? Here we can see this is the representation of Nibiru. This is where we get the image of the cross. And it is some sort of image in the sky that looks like it has to do with agricultural timing. Here again we can see this image of the cross, which is a representation of Nibiru. When we look at what they meant in crossing of the rivers, I believe it had to do with a specific location in the sky rather than it being a planet and where the gods came from. This is known also as the silver and the golden gates. You can see this imagery and symbolism even to this day with the silver gates of Malta and the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, the silver gate being where the sun rises, the Golden Gate being where the sun sets. And we can see here as well, this is the galactic plane, and this is the ecliptic plane, and here they intersect right at the constellation of Orion. Just so happens during our summer solstice this year and over the previous years and the forthcoming years, we're going to have the Orion constellation and this intersection point between the ecliptic and galactic planes intersect with our sun on the solstice. I believe this to be the significance behind the Mayans selecting this end date of the solar calendar being 2012. They were choosing that end date due to this phenomenon. Forward into the golden, and here we can see within the Milky Way that we have almost a river-like appearance. And when we combine this understanding with that of early mythologies of how they associated aquatic life coming from the oceans and giving man the secrets to civilization, when we look at the myths of Oannes or Enki or the Dogon and the Nomos. But even when we analyze the Vatican, we can look at the silver and golden keys. And even within Egyptian mythology, they had this understanding of a silver gate and a golden gate. And here the Vatican is claiming to have the keys to heaven and earth. The silver key being that which one needs to enter this realm of earth, and the golden key being that which is necessary to go to heaven. That is why the Golden Gate Bridge is at the edge of Western civilization. That is the gateway to the mythological heavens, being the end of land and the furthest western point. I believe that the Silver Gate, which is located on Malta, is the representation of the gold or silver key, which you can see Malta is the center point, the center axis of this pyramid triangle, which is a representation of solstice alignments and equinox alignments. So if we zoom into Malta here, we can just click on this island here, and we'll see